Last but certainly not least, the team at Microsoft will be presenting on their transformative technology that addresses CMMC compliance. Microsoft is continuously evolving their technology stack and partnerships to best meet the regulatory demands of CMMC. Partnering with Microsoft to enhance audit-ready solutions to our clients, CyberSheath recognizes Microsoft's expertise and advancement of future-proofing technologies. CyberSheath is a trusted member of Microsoft's Intelligent Security Association, Microsoft Cloud Solutions Provider, Microsoft Premier Support Partner, and Silver Partner. In addition, CyberSheath has had the privilege of becoming part of the select few official resellers for Microsoft GCC High and Office 365 GCC licensing. We would also like to take this time to thank Microsoft for their sponsorship of this year's CMMC Con.
Hello, how are you doing? My name is Phil West. I represent Microsoft and Microsoft CMMC strategy. I'm a director of modern work. So part of my goal is to talk about what we call our governance, risk, and compliance portfolio. And CMMC is the forestone right now of where we're actually showing the most interest in the community, and obviously the compelling events around CMMC certification. Through my email address on here, as well as my LinkedIn, I welcome folks to contact me if you've got questions, as well as for CyberSheath, given the fact that they are hosting this event, and we're very happy to be part of this today. I do want to cover today a few things. This is really kind of my outline. Number one, the impact that we're seeing on customers. What are customers feeling when it comes to CMMC? What are the goods and the bads? Where are the worries? And also what's facing the customers in terms of challenges? Also, what are the Microsoft solutions that will support you? And I call it the CMMC journey, because what it is, it's really a destination that we're going to get to, let's say, for example, maturity level 3. So that's a part of a process we want to keep going over. And number one, we also want to acknowledge that just when we think we're there, just when we get certification, the clock starts ticking all over again. Finally, we're going to bring about some Microsoft resources, part of our software solutions, part of our auditing solutions that allow a customer to get ready and equip themselves to determining how they're going to meet their CMMC obligations. And then lastly, we'll finalize with next steps, where you can get more information from Microsoft, where you can download some additional assets, and then where you can get started on your specific journey. So let's get started. The impact on our customers. This is a graphic that comes from the CMMC accreditation body website, and it really says, where are we today? And again, I'm coming to you at the end of September in 2021. We're at a point now where we're seeing more and more accrediting assessment firms coming online. We've had a few announced already. A lot of others are in progress. We're going to see auditors coming online and getting their training and getting their certification so that they're ready to go out and meet our customers, you, in terms of how you're ready to be assessed for CMMC. We're also finalizing the CMMC accreditation details. So there's been lots of interesting things happening in the CMMC AB. There's been lots of discussions that we've been going through. We're actually pushing on a number of things where technology is actually advancing past some of our existing standards. And so as we talk about standards, we may have rules that we're inheriting from certain standards, let's say 853, that as they're trickling down, we find that in today's marketplace and today's technology, we actually are running into a situation where it's actually going to be important for us to make sure we address the new technology that's coming out and how that new technology actually is going to be crucial to CMMC. Here's another graphic from the AB. This talks about the OSC, the organizations that are seeking certification, what that timeline looks like. And it really is a cycle. It really is, how do I start where I'm at? Again, that journey. How do I start where I'm at and actually make it all the way around to the accreditation piece of it? How do I get ready from a preparation perspective? How do I go through assessments? How do I keep myself educated? How do I make sure I've got training and documentation and a number of other things? And as we know, just when I get my CMMC certification, I'm going to have to start the clock for 3 years to when I have to come back and do this again. So we want to make sure that our customers are prepared for this assessment and that we keep them prepared as we go through our cycles. This is our ladder approach. This is a graphic that we took from the CMMC AB on those ladders of CMMC maturity levels. CMMC is a maturity, a progression timeline. We're going to see that maturity level 3 is the sweet spot that we see a lot of our customer interest in right now. It's where the DoD contracts are concentrating. It's where the market is at. It's where technology is positioning itself. It's where a lot of our defense industrial base partners are seeing the need to get there quickly. And we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to get ready and be ready for that CMMC ML3 audit. Now, I talk about levels 1 and 2 on the slide here. I want people to know that these are progressive steps. So level 1 is some basic adherence to the FAR. Level 2 extends the FAR, looks at some of what's in 800-171, as well as the CMMC practices. Think about building a cake, okay? So we've got the actual cake pieces themselves, and we stack them on top of each other. Then we put the gooey icing in between them. So think about the cake pieces as the 800-171 requirements. The FAR is just the fact that we've got to have a cake plate sitting there to put something on. But now we're building these cake pieces, the actual cake itself, and we're putting the CMMC icing in between them. So we're building on top of a progression. So obviously, if we're building a cake, if the bottom of the cake is soft, it's gooey, it's not done, whatever, you can see where the cake is going to fall, it's going to have problems. So we have to build a foundation up. We're lathering CMMC on top of this. The goal, temporarily right now, is level 3, which is a good cyber hygiene perspective. And I've highlighted just one little note here. Not only do we expect you to have a FAR and be ready for that, you got to have that cake plate. We expect that you've got all of 800-171 ready to go. You're already in compliance with that. That's a CMMC maturity level 3 prereq, if you will. Now that means, well, I've got all my cakes baked. I got all the pieces put into place. They're all perfect. No problems, no bubbles, no air, no nothing. They're ready to go. Now, what we're seeing with a real customer in cases is that we are still in a situation where 800-171 has some deficits in that organization. That's okay, it's understandable, but realize that the CMMC level of effort that everybody keeps talking about, make some assumptions that you've already got these prereqs done. So we'll show you later on how you can assume, if I don't have everything ready, let's give me a health check all the way from the ground up, all the way from 800-171, all the way up into the CMMC space. Let's make sure I'm ready for that. I just want to call that out because, again, that's if you read CMMC documentation, if you read anything in the trade rags, they're going to talk a lot about, hey, CMMC is only this much extra. And understand, that's an accurate statement, but they've got some prereqs, some assumptions in there. And 800-171 revision 1 compliance, as well as further updates, that's kind of part and parcel to the prereqs. Now, I also want to talk about CMMC as it spills outside of the DoD. We all know the CMMC history. Department of Defense Acquisition has a mandate across the defense industrial base supply chain. So this is cybersecurity supply chain mandate, specifically around controlled unclassified information. This is a scenario where we are actually mandated as defense industrial base partners to make sure we're protecting any of that CUI information. To also make sure that we're doing it in a way that is not only protecting it, but it's actually auditing, have accountability. I've got a trail. I know what's happening and I'm able to control that. And I'm also able to document all this. Now, I keep using the word we. Now, in fact, Microsoft itself is subject to CMMC. We actually have a division in Microsoft that is actually working as a defense industrial base supply chain entity in terms of building product, building applications, building solutions, and they are subject also to CMMC. So Microsoft gets routine audits, and we start looking at these audits. So we've actually gone through pre-assessment audits. They're coming back. We're kind of a guinea pig, so to speak. We walk through these in conjunction with the ABs to try to figure out how do we maintain the posture inside of Microsoft, not necessarily on the product side, but on our sales side, our defense industrial base customer facing side. So I keep saying we, and there's a reason behind it. I will say this, CMMC has become the template that is becoming so popular. I think they're actually using CMMC kind of like we use the term Kleenex. You know, if you want a tissue, you need to blow your nose, everybody gets a Kleenex. Well, now CMMC is becoming that. It's a specified name, but it's becoming almost an umbrella type architecture and model. So we're seeing this outside of the DoD. We're seeing it in the Department of Homeland Security, the GSA. We're seeing it across other countries. I'm actually getting involved with other international organizations that want to stand up something very similar to CMMC inside their government organizations. So we're seeing CMMC kind of becoming that template, maybe that de facto standard. Not necessarily always swizzling to the DoD's part of it, but actually just looking at that cyber hygiene progression with requirements underneath and some sort of checks and balances. We're actually seeing the recent executive orders that are coming out. Again, we're in the late September timeframe. You can just look back, you can rewind just a couple, 3 months. All of a sudden you see the supply chain issues coming up over and over again. You see the executive orders coming out, specifically targeting this. So what we believe, again, we're taking some documentation here, but what we believe is we're going to see this same template being used in multiple places. So as we talk about this, we want to make sure that you're not only thinking about this from your Department of Defense, DIB supply chain, but if you have interest outside of the DIB, this is actually going to start affecting that business as well. We want to make sure that you're aware of this and that you're also properly positioned to take advantage of this. Again, part of this is really, how do I get prepared to do an audit? How do I get prepared for my organization to become ready to transact business? This is a requirement. So we want to make sure if you're ready for CMMC, we want you to also make sure at the bottom of your checklist is you're preparing for non-DoD requirements as well that might be coming down and hitting your organization. So let's talk about a little bit about the Microsoft solutions that we want to address the CMMC journey. Again, we're calling it a journey. I want to be very clear. Just purchasing a product, no matter who you buy it from, does not get you CMMC Maturity Level 3 certification. It's not just, hey, I bought it, let me show you my receipt, I'm good to go. That's not the case. This is about how you use those solutions to really make your business a DIB-ready business. So we're going to see this, for example, in the next slide. We talk about this. NIST 800, 171, and now 172 fit just inside of what we call the CMMC framework. We developed this graphic. The left-hand side are the maturity level numbers. Right-hand side are kind of the maturity level taglines. And what we see in the middle is we see a lot of customers, especially level 1, level 2, it's, hey, I've got to get ready for the FAR, assuming you're already done there. I've got to make sure I'm handling FCI, the federal contract information. And then we start looking at that top layer, and we're seeing that DFARS and ITAR are coming into play. CUI is really relevant there. That's CMMC's forefront, is getting ready to and protecting CUI. And then the NIST standards and how they are building upon one another. So we talk about this, and we talk about this supply chain going up. Now, one of the reasons I'm mentioning this is, again, it's September 2021. You might be saying, Phil, I've only got so many contracts. I've got this contract. This is what it says. I've got 3 contracts, different or different agencies. These are the requirements I've got. And I tell people this. I've yet to have a customer come to me and say, you know what, Phil, I'm actually going to decrease my security posture. I actually think this is overblown. It's overrated. I'm actually going to decrease it. What I am seeing is I've got to get ready for tomorrow. And that's why we want to make sure you're ready. Is getting ready for tomorrow is crucial. This is a business cycle. It's a certification cycle, but it's also a scenario where what you're doing today in the CMMC market might be a glimpse of where you want to go. So you might be looking at bidding on additional contracts, higher level contracts, potentially more lucrative contracts that might have a higher escalating CMMC requirement. I think we all know there's level 4 and level 5. We all know what the cycle looks like for that. That's an aspirational goal for many of us. But it's also a scenario that we realize at some point in time, the bar, the watermark, is going to start creeping up. So we believe that CMMC level 3 is that bar line right now that we have to get super prepared for. And again, as I mentioned before, if I can get prepared for that, for defense industrial base, for CUI data, then I'm also ready and have a preparation and a plan for how do I address this for non-CUI, things like civilian defense agency issues. For example, if I'm doing contracting amongst any of those. So I'm going to go here and show you the shared responsibility model. If you're familiar with CMMC, you're going to have heard this term many times before. This really has, on the left-hand side, kind of a mechanism of trying to determine where does the risk lie and who takes ownership of it. It's like a responsibility matrix, if you will. So we have one color coding that's very much light blue. That's the provider side. We have a middle, which is kind of this two-color combo. That's actually shared responsibilities where it has a requirement that we both meet. We're doing certain parts together. And then there's the dark blue, which is basically all up to the customer. So you can see, we've actually looked at this several times in the cloud model. When you talk about on-prem, when you talk about going to IaaS or PaaS or SaaS services. But this same shared responsibility model is crucial in CMMC. I mentioned before, you can't just buy a product and all of a sudden you're ready to go. Number one, just buying a product doesn't even get you close to getting ready to be certified. And it's no guarantee of certification. Certification is between the AB and that certifying auditor and your organization. Microsoft can do certain things to help you on that way, give you certain levels of infrastructure adherence that allow you to build on top of that. And that's where that shared responsibility model really comes in. It's one of those things I tell people, you're the one being audited. So unfortunately, you're the one that's also going to have to be handling what's happening in my network, what's changing, how do I document that, how do I make preparations. One of the things I keep thinking about here is, hey, what happens when you have some administrator that is reassigned to another project, they leave the company, they get promoted doing something else. How much cleanup work are you doing? That's very crucial. We can't just forget about, hey, we've got organizations and, we've got entities that have rights and they might be in different roles in the organization. They might not even be with the company anymore. So there's always going to be a determining factor that Microsoft can help you with tools, but we can't drive the car for you. If we're building a car here, Microsoft has a responsibility to build a safe automobile with safety features, but it's always the driver's responsibility to drive safely, obey the laws, fill up with gas, and change the oil. The regular routine maintenance and ongoing process is crucial. This is an example of a shared responsibility model for Office 365. So according to the NIST, we have organizational delineations here. So an organization's responsibility versus Microsoft's responsibility. You can see where Microsoft has a great responsibility to provide the underpinning, the infrastructure for the shared responsibility model. But Microsoft doesn't have 100% ownership or control of this. For example, Microsoft, you may have a certain requirement that you have in a contract. Certain Microsoft clouds might adhere to that. They might have that built into that product or built into that cloud offering. And if they don't, it's up to you to make up the difference. So if you choose a cloud offering that doesn't offer a certain specification, certain compliance rating, then we have something we call compensating controls. And CMMC is like, okay, perfect. If you don't have X, how do you get to something that looks like X? And X is like, for example, on the CMMC requirements, it's the domain, the level, and the index that we're talking about here. So if you're required to do something like multi-factor authentication, really a baseline, everybody needs it. But if you elect not to use Microsoft's tool, perfect. What tool are you going to use? And so it's an important piece that you've got to piece in those puzzles. You got to fill in the gaps to get ready for that assessment. You don't have to use our tool, but you have to use something. And that's a requirement that says, hey, if you don't get it from us, because it's baked in, then you have to figure out how you're getting it from somewhere else. and then you document that part. That's a really crucial piece of this. I keep talking about document. We really haven't covered the fact that you really are going to need what we call a security plan, an SSP document. You're going to need like the operating manual for your network to say, hey, this is what we're using in terms of security. This is how we're doing it. This is how we're documenting it. And more importantly, this is why it's important to us. So I'm going to show you a few of the offerings for the clouds. We have 4 cloud offerings. Now, basically, these are multiple iterations and flavors of the M365 cloud. So in Microsoft's term, we have an M365 cloud that happens to come in 4 iterations, soon to be more. We have one that's called a worldwide or a commercial iteration. We have something called GCC, Government Community Cloud. We also have something called GCC-H, GCC High, and then we also have the DoD Cloud, again, specifically relegated to DoD agencies. You can see that there are some compliance pieces in here. And in fact, I'm going to show you another blue matrix that's hopefully going to allow you to understand what are the differences between these individual clouds. So this is a documented case study that we've done on compliance differentiation. Pretty soon later on, we'll actually get to a couple links. You'll be able to find this. This is on our tech community. So if you go to that tech community link, you'll be able to find this. This is the compliance comparison between clouds. So what I've done here is I'm talking about M365 capabilities. And you can see I have columns for commercial, GCC, High, and then DoD. For today's discussion, we're going to ignore the DoD side over there. On the capabilities side, these are some of the specific questions that get asked. Number one, who can obtain a service? By the way, not just anybody can sign up for government services. We have to audit this. We have to account for it. You have to be eligible. Where do you have your data centers? How do you handle specific requirements around things like FedRAMP or ITAR? And then finally, how do you handle who owns that data center? In other words, where's the data center located? How is it managed? How is it operated? And what are the requirements on those individuals? So I'm going to go down the left-hand side just to kind of give you an idea. I've highlighted some of those things, but I'm going to talk about, number one, customer eligibility. One of the first things we have to do in Microsoft, if you're looking for government services, which would be GCC, GCC High in this case, if you're looking for those, we have to do an eligibility check. That means that you've been authenticated as having access or the right to use government services on behalf of a contract that you hold. Now, in CMMC, you may not have that contract yet. Remember, CMMC, we have to get ready. We have to get everything created and audited before we can actually sign for bidding on a contract, much less taking actions in that contract. So we use a service like SAM.gov, which is the acquisition management recording. It's like a yellow pages of all the people that do business. And in the SAM.gov entry, we'll actually determine, are you eligible? Do you have a cage code, for example? That gives us a signal that you've already been vetted and it's ready to go. And what we can do is say, we gave it to XYZ company. We gave them this sort of government services tenant. And this is why, because they had this cage code. We go down and we're actually going to see things like data center locations. So we have on the left hand, the columns that we've got there for commercial and GCC. You can see that those actually sit on Azure Commercial. This is Azure Worldwide, Azure Global. So in terms of that, the data center locations, for example, for anything that's in generic commercial is inside the US as well as outside the US. Now, if you're a GCC, if you have that tenant structure, you can request CONUS only. And in fact, that's the default. Your data stays CONUS, continental United States. Same thing with GCC High and obviously DoD. The difference, by the way, here is that on the right-hand side, GCC High as well as DoD, those are separate data centers. They're not part of Azure Global. They're not part of our worldwide data center architecture. They are specific buildings and structures that sit inside of CONUS, inside the United States soil and property, that are also, by the way, housed by US citizens. So these are US personnel that are restricted. So in some cases, those are cleared persons, especially because they have to manage the DoD cloud as well. they have to have certain clear capabilities. And so this is really important. This is one of those things that I keep getting questions about a lot. So if I look at the highlighted pieces of it, obviously CUI is a big thing. How do I protect CUI? Now, if I'm looking at CUI and CDI, controlled defense information, and I'm looking at that as CMMC levels 3 through 5, you can see that GCC has a yes with a caret. There's a caveat. There's a caveat associated with that is that there are CUI capabilities that you have to then use compensating controls to manage. So as I mentioned before, that shared responsibility model, there's only so much that GCC is going to give you in terms of protecting and controlling CUI, and you're going to have to then create your own policies, procedures, your data, if you want to do data sequestering or anything like that. So that's kind of the role that plays. Now, if I move to GCC High, because it is a separated data center with separated personnel, my CUI capabilities are much higher. The ability that you inherit from having a dedicated data center posture is that you have CMMC level 3 capabilities that are a lot more robust. One of them, to go down one line, is ITAR. If you have a no foreign national requirement, or ITAR or EAR maybe, on any of your contracts, that's a requirement that you protect that entity only to U.S. citizens. The data that's used there is U.S. citizen control. Since GCC High lives in a data center construct that is only in the United States, it's only manned and staffed by U.S. persons, then we can actually have an ITAR amendment to a contract that says, hey, you're buying a structure in GCC High that has an infrastructure below it where we know it's all inside the United States, it's all U.S. persons that are always accessing your tenant. So nobody has access to your tenant. And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean that we're poking through your emails or looking through your SharePoint. I draw the analogy, it's almost like a balloon, okay? You can blow up a balloon. You can see how big it gets, how much air is going in or out, but you can't see inside the balloon. And that's very similar to how we operate in our government clouds, which is, and any of our clouds, is that we don't really see what's inside. Now, the fact that a tenant might grow in size, you might be adding users, you might be having a lot of data, that might be a signal to somebody that, hey, XYZ company has got a big contract. Well, that's personal information. That's customer information in Microsoft's eyes. That's something that's unique to you that should not be shared outside. And therefore, just the size of your balloon or the growth rate of your balloon or the shape of it or whatever you want to think about is also protected information. That's kind of metadata. And we want to make sure that we're protecting that as well. That's important. And then finally, we think about some of these others. We think about how do we handle from a person's perspective as well. So again, from a support perspective, it's all US based. From when I say support, I'm also talking about operations, administration, management, provisioning, the back end service of making sure the server connections are correct, making sure that the network is up. All the administrative pieces are all US persons. So just wanted to kind of draw an analogy there, get a lot of questions on this, and wanted to kind of draw a little bit of an analogy here that if you've seen this slide before, if you haven't, there's a long article on our tech community authored by Richard Wakeman, and it goes into excruciating details on what each of these means, and it shows a progression of this slide that builds out left to right. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Microsoft resources that are specifically designed for you to take advantage of on your CMMC journey. So we have what we call the CMMC Acceleration Program. This was launched in 2020 as an accelerator program to allow customers, the defense industrial-based customers, to get a kickstart on CMMC. CMMC really didn't see a lot of the light of day until January of 2020. So here we are, September of 2021, roughly, let's say 20 months later. We've actually seen a situation where we've done the first round of accelerators. We did a new update as it posted in January of this. This is a curated topic. So we developed this package and we have major updates to the package. So the last major update was, for example, in January 2021. We're always doing minor updates. So we're already adding some of these things in. And what you'll see is There's a capability you can go to the website. I'll give you that at the very end of the presentation, where you can get the CMMC Accelerator Kit. You can understand things like Microsoft product placemats, the Azure Sentinel workbooks, Compliance Manager, the blueprints, our Azure Security Benchmark capabilities. And I'm going to walk through a few of these for you. Don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to kind of hit the highlights of what these look like. And again, for more information, you'll be able to get that from the direct links. So now we talk about the Microsoft CMMC product placemat. This is a free Excel download for anybody. You go to this URL, AKAMS, CMMC product placemat. This is an Excel file that allows you to make a few decisions about what potential Microsoft products you're interested in. And then we map it to CMMC Maturity Level 3. We actually map it out to say, these are specific products and this is where they light up the placemat. So first of all, on the left, you can see the first one we do is we make a service panel discussion. What are the service pane discussion? What do we do in terms of what products, what services from Microsoft are we interested in? And for just example's sake, I chose all. You can then whittle it down if you've got Microsoft 365 E3, if you've got E5. If you just want to look at certain services, you can turn everything off and then go down this line of operational pieces and services here and turn them on one by one if you want to. For this example, I chose all. And then I looked at the practices. Remember before I mentioned, probably have some customers that don't have complete adherence to 800.171. So maybe I want to look from a practice perspective of just show me where I've got 800.171 problems because I know I need to go fix them first. Or I think I'm good on 800.171. I just want to look at the new CMMC practices that layer on. Remember, icing on the cake? Well, I'm choosing all practices because this is basically the worst case scenario is I got to make sure of all these things, where do I have a place in the Microsoft solution set, the portfolio, to address these. So I've turned all services on. I've looked at all restricted practices. For example, every rule I've got to go adhere to. And as you can see over here, it lights up the screen. Lights up in blue for things that are directly addressed with Microsoft first-party responsibilities. Then in yellow, it talks about secondary responsibilities. In other words, there may not be a Microsoft product that does a specific function, but it can be used to do a function. And there's a nuance to that. For example, you can set up a lot of things in SharePoint controls just by looking at how do I do restrictions on groups and so forth. Now, Microsoft doesn't give you a create me a CMMC group and do all this. I have tools that can perform those functions. It's just not a CMMC button on the tool that says, go do this directly. You can see here, and I apologize for the small numbering, you can see that just by turning on all the services in Microsoft 365 E5, as well as Azure Security, you're able to address about 80% of what's required in CMMC Level 3. Just a note, by the way, little white boxes are also in domains that might be above 3. So you might have a domain access control. Access control .1, .2, .3, .4, .5, for example. And if you're going for maturity level 3, you don't have to worry about the level 4 and 5 requirements. So understand this is really highlighted for CMMC level 3. It gives you all of them, allows you to even click on a cell and pull up a description of, hey, here's what this really means. And here's how you have to go about adhering to it. So it gives you kind of a primer that says, hey, if you're looking at multi-factor authentication, if that's under a specific domain, you can look at it and say, hey, by the way, if you choose all over here, or onesie twosie, however you want to, hey, have I hit multi-factor authentication yet? If I have, it'll tell me this is exactly the primary product and solution that addresses it. And here might be some secondary ones. Now, MFA is pretty cut and dry, but there could be scenarios here where, hey, there's a primary product that does this, but there's also ancillary products. So if you have a requirement, you may have compensating controls that you have to implement yourself using some of these other services. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to show you another tool, and that is the M365 Compliance Manager. So once you actually have, and again, the product placemat is how do I plan? What products do I think about? What products do I maybe intend to buy? Once I have those M365 products in-house, now let's do a quick check on have I configured them properly for a specific type of compliance requirement. Now, you might think about, well, Phil, there's tons of compliance requirements out there. CMMC is not the only one. Exactly. So what we have is something called templates. Templates work in Microsoft Compliance Manager to say, hey, if you're worried about GDPR, throw the GDPR template on there, run it against your organization, and determine, do you have all of your products and services set up properly to adhere to GDPR? One of the things we also do is if you buy the E5 level for government and it's in your tenant, you can actually get the Compliance Manager templates for CMMC levels 1 through 5. You can get those as part of your CMMC Compliance Manager. So you can actually take those Compliance Manager templates, run a CMMC self-assessment, and determine where are you missing. This is a great tool in using M365 that you can actually say, before I call in a consultant, which is expensive, before I go ever talking to an auditor, I want to make sure I got all my ducks in a row. Let's get all the easy stuff out of the way. Let's dig into some of the harder stuff. And then maybe that means I bring in a consultant, maybe I bring in a service, maybe I bring in some expertise like CyberSheath to say, hey, help me figure out where I've got these dials and widgets and how I need to make sure this is fine-tuned. So that part of the product is actually part of what we call our premium templates. And again, for government level 5, M365 E5 for government, those actual templates are actually included at no additional cost. So you can actually run your own self-assessment, run it periodically, run it repetitively, like that iteration. Let's clean up the mess, figure out where we've got other mess, prioritize it, keep cleaning up. And then when we get to a point where it might be deep in terms of technical or configuration issues, maybe that's when we can pull in a consultant to help us get started. So this is the M365 capability to try to match up with those individual compliance manager requirements. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to jump over to the Azure equivalent to this. That's called Azure Security Benchmark. Now this looks at Azure services. Again, we have customers that only have Azure. We have customers that only have M365. Therefore, there are two tools. And by the way, there is a timeline to start bringing these under an Uber tool. But for right now, there's an Azure security tool. It's a benchmark. It's already part of your Azure subscription. You can already start running it. It's the default security policy engine. Again, from an Azure perspective, you're going to have policies that are set up. If this happens, when this happens, if you see this, do certain things and monitor this. There are also what we call benchmark templates that exist here, and there are CMMC benchmark templates that are being developed that would roll out for example, level 3. Hey, this is what I'm doing in my Azure workspace. So I'm doing things like Azure security. I'm securing virtual machines. I've got a test dev or DevOps environment. I want to secure that. There's a number of iteration and tools that are really designed to help you move forward in that journey. Again, this is a journey. So these are iterative processes. We want to make sure that you're doing these on a routine basis. This also helps you. Remember that SSP document? This is going to help you populate that SSP document with, hey, if you're supposed to do X, are you doing it? How are you doing it? And it also is very crucial for how you would operate a network to say, this is how we write our operator procedure manuals. This is who our SOC would go back to if they wanted to know, wait a minute, I see this. What do I go do to configure that? I've had somebody leave the company. How do I delete them? I've had a new project come on board. How do I create a new project space with the security requirements that are specific to that contract? So again, from a Microsoft services, I've only touched a portion of all the services that help you get prepared for security model level 3. There's a number of Microsoft 365 services around security, compliance, identity management, collaboration, as well as Azure's discrete offerings, Azure Security, Azure Defender for the servers, whether that be an on-premise server, whether it be a server that is hosted in Azure Cloud, We have security center capabilities that can monitor multiple clouds, so not just Azure, but also that A and maybe that G thing we've heard about. We also have Dynamics 365, which is the customer relationship management tool. We have that available in government services offerings as well. That's an important capability that you may be considering if you're looking at how do you handle and manage your FCI, that federal contract information. And then we also have GitHub. We have a special iteration of GitHub, runs in the Azure government cloud structure, and it's really designed for that secure DevOps role. So as you're thinking about developing tools, managing them tools, as well as managing that bill of materials, that secure bill of materials you have to deal with, these are tools that allow you to use Microsoft services in conjunction to get you ready and then keep you ready. Remember, when I started out, I said, listen, we're going to try to get you ready, but we also know keeping you ready for that iterative certification loop is very, very crucial. It's very important. So now we're going to go on to another topic where we finalize with just some of these URLs I was mentioning before. So I mentioned the CMMC Accelerator Program Update. There is an AKA link, aka.ms, CMMC Acceleration Program Update. There's a main Microsoft CMMC site where we host a number of blog posts, a number of reference materials, recorded video sessions. I've got a few sessions up there. There are also other materials as well as how do you get in contact. So that's aka.ms/CMMC. Fairly easy to remember. Tried to make it really short. We do have also a kind of a contact me form, which is at aka.ms/CMMC/contact us. And that is kind of a solution that we put together, building these URLs out so that we realize, number one, we want to make sure that customers are aware of where they are in the journey, and that Microsoft is able to help them move themselves on the journey and get prepared for maybe the marathon that we're going to run, where we run around the track multiple times. And every 3 years, we're going to come into a situation of, wait a minute, we've got to get ready for a certification. We don't want that to be a last-minute preparation step. We want that to be an ongoing, very minimal exposure in terms of time and effort and energy, so that you're always ready, so that you never have to scramble to get all your SSP updated, everything ready, all your stuff locked down, everything labeled or relabeled or reclassified. You're already ready to do that. You've already got that concisely done and documented so that you're ready for the next phase of this. Because as I mentioned before, CMMC is a piece of the journey. CMMC can become a non-DoD template that gets applied. I already mentioned Department of Homeland Security and GSA. I mentioned international organizations doing this. We see states looking to incorporate this. We're looking at this obviously across all of manufacturing. We're seeing folks that are coming in from financial services, from healthcare, who are doing business on behalf of or with the federal government, who also need this. So this CMMC is an expanding solution set. It's a requirement to do business, but it's also very important that we are securing that CUI that is so crucial to enabling and informing our troops as they do their most crucial mission. In a time where cybersecurity is in the news, not in a good way, but we want to be there and be active so that we're able to take advantage of the solutions that Microsoft is able to provide for you and then help you on that journey. And I want to challenge you for one thing, is to start reading up some additional information on our CMMC blog. Look at our stance, look at our capabilities, look at the differences in our clouds. You will find some unique features in those cloud offerings that you don't see anywhere else. The reason is these cloud offerings were purpose-built for government. They were designed specifically. Data centers were built from the ground up, or in some cases, underwater, specifically to house that type of infrastructure that is ready to meet the needs of government entities, both from DoD as well as Defense Industrial Base, and then expanding beyond DoD into what we are now looking at as our secret and top secret clouds. So again, I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for your attention. And I hope that you enjoy this CMMC conference. And thank you very much to CyberSheath for inviting me to join you. Thank you.
I'm Julie Parisi, and it's been my pleasure to host this year's CMMC Con. Now I'm going to hand it off to founder and CEO of CyberSheath, Eric Noonan.